Wyoming's wide-open landscapes hide more than just natural beauty. They hold stories that stretch deep into prehistory, from mysterious stone circles and sacred medicine wheels to legends of tiny mountain beings and ancient quarries of unknown builders. The state is a landscape of secrets. These ancient mysteries whisper of lost civilizations, forgotten rituals, and the powerful forces that still shape the land today. The legend of the little people. If you spend enough time in Wyoming's wild country, especially up in the Wind River Range, you'll hear the same strange story told a dozen different ways. Ranchers talk about it around campfires, hikers whisper it on quiet trails, and Shoshone elders speak of it with a kind of reverence. They call them the Nimeragar, the little people. The story goes that long before settlers ever crossed the plains, before the first mining camps or trading posts, a race of small human-like beings lived among the cliffs and creeks of what's now central Wyoming. They were said to stand no taller than 3 feet, with sharp features and powerful, wiry bodies. Some stories describe them as protectors of the mountains, others as fierce warriors with poison-tipped arrows who would strike without warning if anyone wandered too close to their territory. For the Shoshone, the little people weren't myth. They were real beings who lived parallel to humans, unseen unless they wanted to be. According to some tribal legends, they were spiritual entities, guardians of sacred places. Others believed they were a separate race entirely, living in the caves and stone shelters that dot the Wind River Mountains. Parents would warn children not to play near certain streams or rock piles because that's where the Nimeragar were said to dwell. At first, these tales were easy for outsiders to dismiss. Every region has its folklore. Tiny forest people, tricksters, mountain spirits. But what made the Wyoming legends different was what happened in the summer of 1932 near Casper, when 2 gold prospectors, Cecil Main and Frank Carr, stumbled upon something that seemed to turn the old stories into possible fact. They were working along a canyon called Pedro Mountain when they found a small cave sealed with a layer of rock. Inside, sitting upright on a ledge, was a tiny, mummified human figure. It was only about 14 inches tall, with a flattened nose, dark leathery skin, and teeth visible through shriveled lips. Its arms were crossed, legs folded beneath it as if in meditation, or perhaps burial. What shocked everyone wasn't just its size, but its detail. It looked human. News of the discovery spread fast. The local press dubbed it Pedro, after the mountain where it was found. Photographs circulated showing a miniature man with a full head of hair, a complete skeleton, and what looked like an arrow wound in its skull. Some scientists came to examine it, including anthropologists from Harvard and the American Museum of Natural History. Early X-rays revealed what appeared to be internal organs and a fully developed skeleton, but it didn't look like a baby. It looked like a shrunken adult. Speculation went wild. Some said it was a hoax, maybe a cleverly crafted doll or a child deformed by disease. Others argued it could be proof of an undiscovered race of pygmy humans. The Shoshone and Arapaho communities took a quieter view. They already knew who it was. The Nimeragar, they said, had been real all along. For decades, the Pedro Mountain mummy, as it came to be known, passed from one private owner to another. It was displayed in sideshows, kept behind glass in a Casper drugstore, and eventually sold to a businessman named Leonard Wadler in the 1950s. After that, it vanished. Wadler died, and the mummy disappeared from record. Its location still unknown today. All that remains are a handful of photos, an X-ray, and the conflicting reports of those who examined it. In the years since, researchers have tried to make sense of the story. Some believe the mummy could have been an infant born with an encephaly, a rare condition that causes a small skull and abnormal body proportions. The X-rays from the 1940s seem to show the remains of a very young human, perhaps stillborn, rather than an adult of miniature size. But others point to inconsistencies, the proportion of the limbs, the apparent adult teeth, and the absence of definitive medical testing before it disappeared. Still, the legend of the little people runs much deeper than one mummy. Across North America, different tribes tell eerily similar stories. Tiny warriors, stone throwers, tricksters living underground or in rock shelters. The Crow Nation has the Abasi, the Lakota speak of the Coyote, and the Choctaw have the Quanakasha. In nearly every case, they are small, powerful beings who punish disrespect but reward humility. It's as if these legends all hint at the same shared memory, passed through generations before history was written down. In Wyoming, many of the old petroglyphs scattered along sandstone cliffs depict small human figures standing beside larger ones. Archaeologists usually interpret these as symbols or spirits, but for some locals, they're ancient proof of coexistence. They'll tell you that the little people didn't vanish, they simply moved deeper into the earth, away from the noise of modern civilization. Those who claim to have encountered them describe sudden flashes of movement in the trees, voices carried on the wind, or the sound of pebbles thrown from unseen places. Hunters in the Wind River Mountains have reported finding tiny arrowheads, no larger than a fingernail, carved from obsidian. While archaeologists identify these as bird points, made for small game, others insist they belong to something far stranger. Skeptics, of course, point out that there's no verifiable evidence, no DNA, no preserved bodies, no verified artifacts that prove a separate race of miniature humans ever lived in North America. But that hasn't stopped the legend from growing. The story of the Nymaragar lives in the cultural space between myth and archaeology, where belief doesn't always need proof. Today, if you drive through the Wind River Reservation or hike near the base of the Bighorns, you'll find signs warning visitors to treat the land respectfully. Elders say the little people still watch those who enter their territory, and that misfortune often follows those who mock or disturb sacred ground. Even experienced hikers sometimes admit feeling an uncanny presence, like being observed from behind the rocks, though no one's there. There's a quiet eeriness in those mountains. The light filters differently through the pines, and the wind sometimes carries what sounds almost like whispering. Locals say that if you camp near certain streams at night, you might hear faint laughter echoing through the trees. Whether it's the wind, wildlife, or something else, no one can say for sure. When you visit today, the beauty of the Wind River Range is breathtaking. Crystal lakes, alpine meadows, granite peaks stretching endlessly. It's hard to imagine anything sinister or secretive living out there, but that's part of what makes the legend stick. In a place so vast and untouched, where human footprints fade within days, who's to say what might still be hiding among the cliffs? The mystery of the little people of Wyoming endures not because of proof, but because of possibility. It reminds us that even in an age of satellites and science, there are still corners of the world that don't yield all their secrets. Whether the Nymaragar were spirits, an ancient race, or simply a reflection of our need to explain the unknown, their story continues to echo through the mountains they once called home. The Spanish Diggings. Out on the rolling plains of eastern Wyoming, between Guernsey and Hartville, lies a place that doesn't seem like much at first glance, just wide-open prairie scattered with sandstone outcrops and wind-bent grass. But if you walk across the land carefully, you'll start to notice something strange. The ground is littered with thousands of old pits, hammerstones, and flakes of quartzite. It's as if an entire city of miners once worked here and then vanished. Locals call it the Spanish Diggings, a name that goes back more than a century. Early settlers, upon seeing the massive quarries and ancient tools, assumed that Spaniards had once been there searching for silver or gold. But as time went on, it became clear that the site was far older than any Spanish explorer who ever reached the plains. Whoever had mined these hills had done so long before written history. The site covers nearly 400 square miles, one of the largest prehistoric quarry systems in North America. From the air, it looks like the surface of the moon. Thousands of circular pits, some 10 feet deep, spread across the hillsides. Stone hammers and anvils lie everywhere, the remnants of intense, organized labor. But what exactly were they digging for? That's part of the mystery. Archaeologists believe the workers were quarrying a hard, glassy type of stone called quartzite, and a form of flint, sometimes known as Hartville chert. These materials were prized for making arrowheads, spear points, and knives. What's remarkable is how widespread those tools became. Artifacts made from this very stone have been found across the Great Plains from the Dakotas to Colorado, even as far south as Texas. Whoever controlled this site must have been part of a powerful trade network, one that stretched hundreds of miles in every direction. But even with modern archaeology, no one can say for sure who they were. Some of the oldest tools and debris here have been dated to at least 6,000 years ago, possibly older. That places them long before known tribal histories in the region. The people who dug the Spanish Diggings might have been among the earliest inhabitants of Wyoming, working generation after generation to extract stone from the hills. When white settlers first discovered the quarries in the late 1800s, they couldn't believe such an immense operation could have been built by Native Americans. At the time, there was a deep bias against acknowledging indigenous sophistication, so early newspapers and amateur historians concocted stories of lost civilizations, Spaniards, Vikings, or even a mysterious race of mound builders. Some speculated that Coronado's men, rumored to have traveled north in the 1500s, had mined the area for gold. But there's no record of any Spanish expedition reaching this far into Wyoming. What's even stranger is that no evidence of permanent housing or villages has ever been found at the site. There are no hearths, no clear signs of long-term settlement, just the mines themselves, stretching on for miles. This has led to a haunting image of people who came here for a single purpose, to work the stone. Then when their task was done, they left the land silent again. Local ranchers still find tools today. Hammerstones that fit perfectly in the hand. Flakes of chert sharp enough to cut skin even after centuries. Some of these objects have been collected in local museums, like the one in Guernsey, but countless others have disappeared into private collections. Old-timers tell stories of farmers using ancient hammerstones as doorstops, or of kids finding arrowheads by the bucketful. Despite decades of study, the Spanish diggings remain stubbornly enigmatic. Archaeologists have mapped portions of the site, but most of it has never been fully excavated or dated. The challenge is partly its size. Hundreds of square miles are difficult to study systematically, and partly the delicate nature of the evidence. Without carbon-datable material like bones or charcoal, it's nearly impossible to assign firm ages to the quarries. Still, the clues we do have suggest something remarkable. The quarrying here was not random or chaotic. The pits were laid out with method, and the choice of rock was selective. The people who worked here understood geology. They knew how to identify the best seams of stone, how to break it cleanly, and how to shape it into usable forms. This wasn't simple survival, it was craftsmanship. It speaks of a society with organization, trade, and specialized labor. Even today, when you stand on those hills and look out over the broken stone, you can almost imagine the sound of hammering echoing in the wind. Thousands of workers striking, chiseling, gathering, hauling. It must have been a place of constant motion and sound, now reduced to eerie silence. The landscape around the Spanish diggings carries an almost sacred feeling. Many Native American tribes consider these quarries part of their ancestral heritage. Some elders say the stones were not merely resources, but gifts from the earth meant to be taken with respect. The land itself, they say, holds memory. That idea feels tangible when you visit. There's something about the emptiness, the wind, and the rhythm of the terrain that makes the past seem close. There's also a more speculative layer to the mystery. Over the years, some explorers and fringe historians have claimed to find unusual artifacts, objects that seem out of place or impossible to explain. One old story tells of a bronze tool found near Hartville, though it was never verified and later disappeared. Others insist that ancient inscriptions, possibly in a foreign script, were once visible on nearby rock faces before erosion erased them. While mainstream archaeologists reject these claims, they've helped keep the legend alive. The idea that something much older or stranger once happened here. Adding to the mystery is how the quarries got their misleading name. Spanish diggings was coined by 19th century settlers who found it easier to imagine Spanish miners than indigenous engineers. It's an irony that still lingers. Despite clear archaeological evidence that native peoples created and used the site, the romantic name has stuck, as if the truth was too ordinary compared to the legend. If you visit today, the land feels both vast and intimate. The quarries are scattered across low ridges and valleys dotted with sagebrush. There's usually no one else around. The wind comes in steady, carrying the scent of dust and grass. Sometimes you'll spot a piece of worked stone glinting in the sunlight, just a small reminder that someone's hands shaped it thousands of years ago. Standing there, it's easy to understand why this place has captured imaginations for so long. It represents a mystery that refuses to be fully solved. We can measure the pits, analyze the stone, and map the trade routes, but the people themselves, their language, beliefs, and reasons remain out of reach. The Spanish diggings are more than an archaeological site. They're a glimpse into a time when human ingenuity worked hand in hand with the natural world, when survival and artistry were the same act. And they remind us that Wyoming's quiet plains once rang with the sounds of human ambition, long before the word Wyoming even existed. Today, visitors can still walk the old quarry fields. There are no fences, no ticket booths, just open sky and the traces of forgotten hands. Whether you see it as an archaeological wonder or an unsolved riddle, the Spanish diggings stand as a silent monument to the deep, untold past buried beneath the Wyoming prairie. The Red Gulch Dinosaur Track site. About 10 miles west of Grey Bull, Wyoming, where the land rolls into the dry, golden hills of the Bighorn Basin, lies a place that looks ordinary at first, a stretch of rocky ground, pale and sun-baked, cut by a shallow wash called Red Gulch. There's no grand marker or towering monument, but if you walk across the exposed limestone after a rain, you'll notice something impossible to miss: hundreds of fossilized footprints pressed deep into the stone. Some look like giant bird tracks, others like clawed impressions left mid-stride. It's called the Red Gulch Dinosaur Track site, and it's one of the most surprising paleontological discoveries in Wyoming's history. For a long time, nobody knew these prints existed. The area was remote and seldom visited, just a dusty patch of public land that cattle wandered across. Then, in 1997, a local woman named Bonnie Kaltenegger and her friend Dissy Spoon stopped there during an off-road drive. They noticed a strange pattern in the rock, three-toed marks repeating across the surface like something had walked through soft mud millions of years ago. They reported it to the Bureau of Land Management, and soon paleontologists arrived to investigate. What they found changed how scientists viewed this part of ancient Wyoming. At first, geologists believed the region had once been a shallow marine environment, a coastal lagoon filled with marine life during the Jurassic period, around 116.7 million years ago. The rock layer containing the tracks, known as the Morrison Formation, was thought to represent ocean floor, so when experts saw hundreds of dinosaur footprints embedded there, they were baffled. Dinosaurs weren't supposed to be walking on the seabed. Something about the story of this landscape had to be rewritten. Over time, careful study revealed that the area had actually been part of a vast intertidal flat, a muddy, wet shoreline exposed during low tide. Dinosaurs had wandered across the soft sediment, leaving their footprints in the damp sand. When the tide came back in, fine layers of silt filled the tracks and preserved them as fossils. It's an ancient snapshot of a moment frozen in time, a glimpse of life moving through what was once the edge of a Jurassic sea. But what kind of dinosaurs made these tracks? That question still fuels debate. Most of the footprints appear to have been left by theropods, the group that includes predators like Allosaurus and Megalosaurus. The tracks vary in size from small, 3-inch marks to prints over a foot long, suggesting that both young and adult dinosaurs roamed here. Some scientists think they might have been chasing fish or scavenging along the waterline. Others believe they were simply migrating across the flats. The pattern of the footprints tells a subtle story. Many of the tracks run in the same direction, as if multiple animals moved together, perhaps following a retreating tide. Some show clear heel and toe impressions, indicating the dinosaurs were walking at a steady pace. A few even preserve tiny ripples around the edges, evidence that the mud was still wet when the print was made. It's hard not to imagine the scene. A humid morning 1,607 million years ago, the air thick with the smell of salt and decay, as a group of dinosaurs strode across the tidal plain, unaware that their steps would be immortalized. As excavations continued, paleontologists realized the Red Gulch Track site wasn't just a random patch of prints, it was the largest set of Middle Jurassic dinosaur tracks in North America. That's significant, because fossil evidence from this period is scarce. The Middle Jurassic was a transitional time in dinosaur evolution, yet very few trackways have survived. The Red Gulch discovery suddenly opened a window into that lost era. Over 1,000 individual footprints have now been mapped across the site, covering an area roughly the size of a football field. Some prints overlap, forming dense trackways that almost look like an ancient intersection where animals crossed paths. Others are isolated, single steps preserved in perfect detail. There are even marks that seem to belong to small bird-like creatures, possibly early ancestors of modern birds, long before birds officially appear in the fossil record. Of course, mysteries still surround the site. Some prints don't fit neatly into known dinosaur categories. A few appear oddly shaped, too deep or narrow to match standard theropod anatomy. These have inspired fringe theories that human-like or unknown species once walked alongside dinosaurs, though professional scientists firmly reject that idea. Most of these out-of-place tracks are simply misidentified impressions, distorted by erosion or overlapping footprints. Still, that hasn't stopped the Red Gulch Track site from attracting both researchers and believers in the unexplained. What makes the site feel mysterious even today is its atmosphere. When you stand there, surrounded by layered stone that once lay beneath a prehistoric sea, there's a quiet eeriness in realizing how long ago these creatures lived and how their moment of motion is still right there under your feet. The prints curve gently through the rock, leading off toward the hills, as if the dinosaurs might have just stepped out of sight. The surrounding terrain adds to the mood. The Bighorn Basin is stark and beautiful, with bands of red and gray sediment cutting through the hillsides. In summer, the heat shimmers off the limestone. Grasshoppers buzz, and a hot wind drifts across the open flats. It's the kind of silence that makes you aware of every sound, your footsteps echoing on ancient stone, the crunch of gravel where water once flowed. Today, the Red Gulch Dinosaur Track site is managed by the Bureau of Land Management and open to the public. Wooden boardwalks wind through the area, and interpretive signs mark key footprints. Visitors are encouraged to bring water and wear sturdy shoes, since the sun can be brutal in midsummer. After a rain, the prints darken, standing out sharply against the pale rock. It's the best time to see them. You can almost picture the dinosaur's claws pressing into the wet ground. For scientists, the site continues to offer valuable data. Each year, researchers return to map new trackways using drones and 3D scanning, hoping to understand how these animals moved and how environmental conditions preserved their prints. The information helps refine models of dinosaur behavior and paleoclimate during the Jurassic period. For everyone else, the mystery lies less in the science and more in the feeling it gives you. Standing among those tracks, it's impossible not to think about the passage of time, how life leaves its mark in unexpected ways. These footprints aren't bones or skeletons, they're moments of action, preserved by accident. A creature took a step, pressed its weight into soft mud and walked away, and millions of years later we found it. Some locals say that during sunset, when the light turns red across the stone, the tracks almost seem to move. It's an illusion, the shadows lengthening, but for a second, it looks like something invisible is still walking there. Whether that's imagination or something deeper, no one can say, but it fits the mood of Wyoming, where the ancient world and the present often feel like they're only a thin layer apart. The Red Gulch Dinosaur Track site isn't just a scientific treasure. It's a quiet reminder of how much of Earth's story is still buried beneath our feet. It invites questions about time, change, and survival, about how even the smallest trace can outlive everything else. In a landscape that seems timeless, these fossilized steps are proof that nothing truly stands still. The Hot Springs of Thermopolis. Tucked into the heart of central Wyoming, the town of Thermopolis looks like something out of a Western travel postcard. Rugged hills, wide skies, and steam curling into the air from the hot mineral springs that have bubbled here for thousands of years. The name itself comes from the Greek for hot city, and it's fitting. This place has been known for its healing waters longer than anyone can remember. But beneath the easy tourist charm lies a mystery older than recorded history. One that ties geology, legend, and human belief together in a way few places can match. Long before settlers arrived, the Hot Springs State Park area was sacred ground. The eastern Shoshone and Arapaho tribes believed the steaming waters were a gift from the spirits, a place where the earth's breath rose to heal the sick and cleanse the soul. They told stories of warriors and hunters who came here to seek recovery after battle or hardship. Even rival tribes were said to set aside conflict near the springs, honoring the site's sacred peace. The land was not to be fought over, only respected. The hot springs emerge from deep fissures in the limestone hills along the Bighorn River. Water heated by geothermal forces miles below the surface seeps upward, carrying with it dissolved minerals like calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. Over centuries, these minerals have built thick terraces of white and golden stone formations that look almost alive, like frozen waterfalls. Locals call them the terraces of healing, and even now they're constantly growing as new mineral deposits form. What's strange, though, is just how powerful and consistent these springs are. Every 20 minutes or so, roughly 3.6 million gallons of mineral water flow out at a temperature of about 135 degrees Fahrenheit. That's an enormous, steady output, rivaling some of the world's most active geothermal systems. Scientists have studied the hydrology for decades, yet the precise underground source remains uncertain. The heat likely comes from ancient volcanic activity deep beneath the Earth's crust, but no active volcano exists anywhere near Thermopolis today. It's as if the ground is still holding on to a memory of fire from another era. To the early settlers of the late 1800s, this constant upwelling of hot, mineral-rich water seemed almost supernatural. Travelers wrote of the ground breathing in mist and light. Animals would gather at the edges of the pools, sometimes standing motionless in the steam as if hypnotized. Birds seemed drawn to the warmth during winter, their calls echoing against the canyon walls. People who came here sick sometimes left claiming they'd been cured. Whether it was the minerals, the heat, or the sheer calm of the place, no one could say for sure, but the stories spread. In 1896, the U.S. government formally acquired the land from the Shoshone and Arapaho through what was known as the Thermopolis Hot Springs Deed, a treaty guaranteeing that the waters would always remain free to the public. That promise still stands today. The springs were developed into Hot Springs State Park, and visitors began to arrive from all over the country seeking healing and relaxation. But with the development came something else, questions about what the springs might be hiding beneath the surface. Geologists found evidence that the underground reservoir feeding Thermopolis might extend for miles, possibly connecting to other geothermal systems farther north. Some theorized it could be part of a massive, ancient fault line, a kind of buried scar in the Earth's crust that channels superheated water upward. Others have speculated that there's an extinct magma chamber deep below, slowly cooling but still releasing residual heat. In either case, the system's sheer size and endurance are unusual. And then there are the unexplained stories, the kind locals tell with a smile, but not entirely as a joke. People talk about lights appearing in the steam at night, faint orbs drifting above the pools before vanishing. Some say they're swamp gases, others that there's something older, spirits still watching over the water. There are accounts from the early 1900s of visitors hearing distant drumming or voices while bathing in the springs, even when no one else was nearby. The Shoshone believed these sounds were the echoes of ancient ceremonies, carried upward through the earth itself. One of the most curious legends says that beneath the terraces lies a sleeping serpent, a great stone creature whose breath warms the waters. The serpent, according to local lore, was struck by lightning during a battle of the gods and buried underground. Its spirit still moves slowly in its rocky tomb, releasing heat whenever it stirs. It's a poetic image, and when you stand near the steaming pools, it's not hard to see how such a myth could take hold. Even the science adds to the awe. The water emerging from the springs today fell as rain or snow thousands of years ago, seeping gradually into the earth and collecting heat before returning to the surface. In other words, when you step into those pools, you're touching something that began its journey before human civilization even existed. The idea that something that old could still hold power, that's where the mystery deepens. Visitors who come to Thermopolis today can bathe in the state bathhouse, where the mineral water is cooled to a comfortable temperature. The building is modest, free to the public, and run by the state, an ongoing tribute to the original treaty promise. Just across the river are two private resorts, each with outdoor pools that overlook the mineral terraces. The smell of sulfur hangs in the air, faint but constant. On cool mornings, steam drifts across the landscape, blurring the line between earth and sky. What makes the place so intriguing isn't just the science or the legends, it's the feeling you get while standing there. The ground hums faintly underfoot, the pools bubble and ripple as if alive. The air is thick with warmth and minerals that sting your nose but somehow feel cleansing. There's a sense of deep time, of forces far beyond human control quietly at work beneath your feet. For locals, the springs are part of daily life, a place to swim, heal, and relax. But for those who listen a little closer, the whispers of the past are still there. The Shoshone stories remind visitors to treat the water with respect, as a living spirit rather than just a resource. The terraces, constantly forming and reforming, echo the passage of time and renewal. And beneath it all, the mystery continues. A hidden world of heat and pressure that sustains the springs but keeps its true depth secret. In the end, the hot springs of Thermopolis embody that rare meeting point between the natural and the spiritual. Science can measure the minerals and temperatures, but it can't quite explain why the place feels so alive, or why, after thousands of years, people still come seeking something more than just a bath. Whether it's the memory of ancient fire, the spirit of the serpent, or simply the quiet power of the earth itself, the waters of Thermopolis remind us that some mysteries are meant to be felt rather than solved. The Shoshone Sundance sites. If you've ever driven through Wyoming's Wind River country, you've probably noticed how the land seems to open up in quiet reverence. The hills flatten, the air feels lighter, and the sky seems close enough to touch. Hidden among these wide golden plains are sacred places where generations of native people have gathered for one of the most important and mysterious ceremonies in North America, the Sundance. The Shoshone Sundance sites are scattered across central Wyoming, often near water or natural landmarks, and they carry an ancient spiritual weight that outsiders still struggle to understand. The Sundance isn't just a ritual, it's a renewal of life. It's been practiced by plains tribes for centuries, including the eastern Shoshone and northern Arapaho of Wyoming. Every summer, when the world feels full and alive, people would come together to dance, fast, and pray for healing, balance, and harmony between earth and sky. But the deeper you look, the more mysterious these sites become, because long before written history, these stone circles and ceremonial grounds already existed. Archaeologists have found traces of circular stone alignments, teepee rings, and cleared dance areas across the Wind River Basin and nearby high plains. Some of these stone circles are arranged in patterns that suggest astronomical purpose, perhaps marking the summer solstice when the sun dance traditionally begins. Others seem positioned to frame distant peaks or river valleys, aligning perfectly with sunrise or sunset. Whether by intention or coincidence, the layout feels deliberate, as if the land itself was mapped into a kind of spiritual calendar. For the Shoshone and Arapaho, these sites aren't relics, they're living places. Each summer, the people still come together on the Wind River Reservation to perform the Sundance. The ceremony lasts several days, involving fasting, singing, drumming, and intense endurance. At the heart of it stands the Sundance Lodge, a massive circular structure built from cottonwood poles, with a single central tree representing the connection between this world and the spirit world above. That central pole is chosen carefully and treated with deep respect, as though it's alive. When you stand near one of these old Sundance grounds, some now quiet, marked only by faint rings of stone, you can almost feel the echo of drums. The wind carries a rhythm, and the silence hums in a way that feels charged. There's a weight to it, like standing in a place where time folds. Visitors often describe a strange calm that settles over them, as if the land remembers what happened here, and still holds on to it. What adds to the mystery is how old some of these alignments appear to be. In certain areas near Crowheart and Riverton, archaeologists have dated rock rings and ceremonial structures that could predate known Shoshone settlement by hundreds, maybe thousands of years. Were these the work of ancestral peoples who came long before, or have these sacred sites simply been reused and renewed by every generation that passed through? There's also the question of what early European explorers actually saw when they described sun worship rituals on the plains. Some of the earliest records from the 1700s mention large gatherings near the Bighorn Basin and Wind River country, with people dancing from sunrise to sunset. Those descriptions are rough, filtered through the eyes of outsiders who didn't understand the language or the symbolism, but they line up surprisingly well with known Shoshone Sundance traditions today. The ceremony itself is complex and deeply spiritual. Dancers pray not just for themselves, but for all life, humans, animals, and the land. They endure physical hardship as a form of offering. Some tribes include piercing as part of the dance, where participants are temporarily bound to the central pole and release themselves through movement, symbolizing rebirth. It's not about pain, it's about sacrifice and renewal. But not every site shows clear evidence of recent ceremony. Some have only faint traces, a few stones, a shallow depression, or a weathered wooden pole long collapsed. Others are more elaborate, with radiating lines of rocks or multiple circles clustered together. These may have been used for different spiritual purposes, perhaps before the Sundance as we know it took shape. To archaeologists, that makes them a puzzle. Are these ancient Sundance sites, or are they remnants of even older rituals lost to time? There's one particular area near Fort Washakie where a ring of stones sits on a rise overlooking the Wind River. It's said to be one of the oldest ceremonial spots in the region. Elders tell stories of people coming there before dawn to greet the first light, singing songs that no one remembers now. Some locals claim that on the morning of the summer solstice, the sun aligns perfectly between two distant peaks as it rises over the valley. Whether that's chance or design, it's easy to see why people considered it sacred. Of course, the Sundance was nearly lost in the late 1800s. The US government banned it under policies that tried to suppress native religion and ceremony. Many dances went underground, held in secret in remote valleys or deep in the mountains. The Wind River tribes continued quietly, keeping the tradition alive through whispered songs and hidden lodges. When the ban was finally lifted in the 1930s, the ceremonies came back into the open, but with a sense of resilience that's still felt today. Visiting one of these sites now, especially the older, quieter ones, isn't like visiting a ruin. It feels alive even when it's empty. You'll see circles of stone against yellow grass, open skies that go on forever, and the faint tracks of elk nearby. The land hums with memory. Some visitors say they feel a pulse under their feet, a faint vibration that might just be wind through the grass or something older stirring beneath the surface. In recent years, tribal historians have worked to map and protect these sites from damage and development. They've collaborated with archaeologists to document what's left without disturbing what's sacred. The challenge is always balance: how to study the past without intruding on living tradition. Some locations remain unmarked on maps, intentionally hidden to keep them safe. To stand in one of those circles as the sun dips low over the mountains is to feel time blur. You realize how long people have gathered here, not just for religion, but for survival, for meaning, for connection. The Shoshone Sundance sites are more than archaeological curiosities, they're living symbols of endurance. Today you can still see the modern Sundance lodges rise each summer on the Wind River Reservation, built with the same care and respect as they were centuries ago. Drums echo through the valley, and prayers rise with the dust. The world outside keeps changing, but here, something ancient still breathes. If you find yourself traveling through central Wyoming and pass near the Wind River, slow down and look out toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, in a field that looks ordinary from a distance, the earth holds a circle, a place where people once danced for the sun and maybe still do.